episode of Fawlty Towers, which was removed from the UK TV network because it contained racial slurs, is to be reinstated with extra guidance for viewers.
The only real difference between him and Basil is that he was small and had a very large henpecking wife.
When BBC archivists opened a sealed folder labeled Fawlty Towers Restricted, they expected harmless scripts and old memos. Instead, they found a banned episode, a single line circled in red, and chilling notes about a moment that silenced the room.
So I didn't have any problems with saying what I didn't think was funny. No, I don't believe that. Why does he say that?
One producer walked out. Executives halted everything. Forever. What was said? Who was the guest that triggered it? And why did this one joke threaten to bring down Britain's most iconic comedy? Let's uncover the scene that disappeared. A joke that landed too hard. When archivists at the BBC opened a sealed production cabinet marked Fawlty Towers Restricted, they expected the usual contents. Rehearsal stills, cue sheets, and outdated standards memos from the mid-1970s. Instead, tucked between script revisions and handwritten notes, they found something that made them pause. The folder held a draft of an episode that never aired. It contained edits, warnings, and a single line of dialogue circled several times in red ink.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes, I mean, will 100 be enough? I mean, 150, 200, 160, or...
To understand why this line carried so much weight, the archivists had to trace the story back to the early days of the series, when Fawlty Towers was becoming one of Britain's sharpest comedies. When the writers submitted an early version of an episode late in the production cycle, the standards team flagged a single joke that felt different from the rest. The humor was still rooted in Basil's frustration, but this time the target was broader. It hinted at a real political tension present in Britain at the time. The line itself was short, but it carried an implication that even the producers sensed could trigger backlash. During the production of the first season, the writers understood exactly what made the show different. Basil Fawlty was not simply rude. His tension with the guests revealed the quiet pressure shaping real British social behavior. Every awkward dinner guest, every petty complaint, every overdone formality reflected something familiar to those watching at home. The humor worked because it was uncomfortable in a way that felt truthful. As development continued, producers noticed Basil's barbs becoming sharper and more pointed. A few internal memos from the BBC standards team warned that the satire was beginning to edge into riskier territory. Most concerns were minor and easy to fix. Notes were added in margins, scenes softened, and certain lines rewritten. Yet one draft moved far beyond minor concern. According to the production notes, the initial table read produced an unusual reaction. Instead of the familiar bursts of laughter from the cast, the room went quiet. Some actors exchanged glances as if waiting for someone else to react first. A script assistant wrote that the line felt heavier than intended, almost as if it belonged to another kind of show.
Oh, it's so obvious now. I've seen the line. Well, I must be punished then, mustn't I? You're a naughty boy, Fawlty. Don't do it. Don't. She's going to be back at lunchtime.
The director asked the team to continue, but the silence left a mark. When producers discussed the draft privately, they debated whether the joke could be reframed, softened, or removed entirely. The writers argued that the line reflected an honest truth about British society and fit the spirit of the series. The standards team disagreed. Their notes warned that viewers might see it as commentary rather than comedy. They feared that satire aimed at a specific social group would cross the line between observation and insult. As the episode moved toward final review, the warnings grew stronger. The controversial line stayed in the script for several drafts, circled again and again. Eventually, the entire episode was pulled aside. The joke never returned in any later version. And while Fawlty Towers continued to air and ultimately became a classic, this moment showed just how close the series came to stepping into territory the BBC was not prepared to defend. The episode that felt dangerous. As researchers continued sorting through the restricted BBC archive boxes, they found a second folder linked to the shelved script. This one contained rehearsal reports, scene breakdowns, and several pages of internal observations from the studio floor. Unlike most documents from the series, these notes carried an unusual tone. Phrases such as tense atmosphere, unusual pacing, and unexpected reactions from cast appeared repeatedly. The archivists realized they were looking at evidence from a rehearsal that had not gone as expected. The episode in question had entered the standard production process. Sets were ready, costumes prepared, and the cast gathered to begin blocking each scene. Everything appeared normal, but as they moved toward the section containing the controversial line, the energy in the studio changed. Multiple reports described the same shift. The rhythm of the scene slowed. Even actors who normally approached Basil's outbursts with ease hesitated before delivering their cues. It was as if everyone sensed they were approaching a moment that did not fit comfortably within the familiar structure of the show. The controversy centered not on Basil alone, but on his reaction to a guest character whose presence had shifted the episode's entire tone. One note from the assistant director described the silence that settled over the room as the scene unfolded. Instead of reacting with the usual mix of amusement and anticipation, crew members stood quietly at their positions. The comedic timing felt different. Pauses stretched longer than intended. Basil's irritation carried a weight that no one expected.
Ah, what are you doing? Oh, jeez, what's going on?
I'm sorry, I thought you were somebody else.
You scared the hell out of me.
Yes, I'm awfully sorry. You see, there's a girl in there, and the bloke's not going to
The written reports suggested the scene no longer felt like satire. It felt more like commentary. One note from the assistant director described the silence that settled over the room as the scene unfolded. During the break, some cast members voiced concerns privately, not about the performance itself, but about the tone that emerged. The humor, they felt, leaned toward a specific cultural tension actively unfolding across Britain. One performer described it as holding a mirror too close to the audience. Another wrote that the line cut deeper than expected. The director attempted to reset the energy in the room by asking the cast to run the scene again with a lighter touch. They tried adjusting the delivery, softening certain phrases, and shifting the pacing. But even with these changes, the underlying tension did not disappear. The scene continued to feel charged in a way that was difficult to explain. The rehearsal reports showed repeated attempts to recapture the show's usual balance of absurdity and discomfort. None of them succeeded. By the end of the day, the production team made the unusual choice to halt further rehearsals of the scene. Instead of refining the performance, they documented their concerns and forwarded them to the producers. They noted that audience reactions during a pre-screening could be unpredictable. They recommended a full review before filming continued. These reports created a clear picture. Something about the episode felt dangerous, not because of the line alone, but because of how fully it reflected the social climate outside the studio. It was becoming clear that the controversial line was only the first sign of a deeper problem. The line that silenced the room. When the production review team examined the next set of documents, they found a brief but striking report from the day the episode was finally filmed. Unlike the rehearsal notes that hinted at unease, this account described a moment that shifted the entire trajectory of the episode. It focused on the delivery of the controversial line. The same phrase circled repeatedly in red ink across multiple drafts. Filming began early. The cast stepped into their familiar positions inside the recreated hotel lobby, a space that usually echoed with exaggerated arguments, hurried footsteps, and the controlled chaos that defined the show's humor. But according to the stage report, the crew sensed the same quiet tension that had hovered during rehearsals. They moved forward anyway, following the day's schedule. When cameras rolled, the scene unfolded smoothly at first. Basil's frustration rose in the familiar rhythm, building toward the joke that had caused so much concern. The actors exchanged lines with practiced precision. Nothing felt unusual. But when John Cleese, the actor who played Basil Fawlty and co-creator of the series, reached the moment the writers had debated for weeks, everything shifted. He delivered the line exactly as written, with no improvisation. His tone was sharp but controlled, consistent with how he had shaped Basil throughout the show. Yet the reaction in the studio was immediate. Instead of the usual restrained laughter, the room fell into a stillness that lasted far longer than any scripted pause. Crew members later described the silence as heavy, almost chilling. A camera operator wrote that it felt like the temperature dropped. Even the director, known for resetting the energy between takes, remained quiet. The tension came from recognition. Something had crossed an invisible line. The script supervisor noted that one producer stepped away from the monitor and paced at the back of the studio, as if trying to interpret what had just unfolded. The line had not been delivered aggressively. Nothing was shouted. Yet the meaning lingered with unexpected weight, striking a cultural nerve that still felt sensitive across Britain. After several long seconds, the director called a break. The cast dispersed quietly. Conversations were replaced by whispers. Some suggested altering the line, others wanted it removed altogether. The producers made no immediate decision. They ended the session early and scheduled an internal screening dot. The silence after the line became the turning point. It confirmed what earlier memos only hinted at. The episode carried a risk no one could measure, and airing it might come with consequences the BBC was not prepared to face. The guest character who caused the storm. When the archivists moved deeper into the restricted files, they uncovered casting notes and character outlines tied to the shelved episode. These documents revealed something earlier memos had not fully explained. The controversial scene did not originate from Basil alone. It centered on a guest character whose presence shifted the episode's entire tone. The character was added late in the writing process to explore a type of social tension Britain faced in the mid-1970s. On paper, he seemed harmless, an opinionated traveler whose confidence bordered on arrogance. Similar characters had appeared before, often triggering Basil's frustration. But this one was different. The notes showed his dialogue touched on a subject still sensitive nationwide. The writers intended his exaggerated behavior to highlight the absurdity of certain political attitudes shaping public life. They expected audiences to recognize the satire immediately. Early casting reports, however, suggested the line between humor and commentary was thinner than anticipated. Standards reviewers questioned whether viewers would see the character as parody or as a direct mockery of those with similar beliefs. During the initial read-through, the actor delivered the lines with perfect confidence. Observers, though, noted an unexpected undertone. His performance made the satire feel sharper. One production assistant wrote that the character felt too close to reality, as if drawn directly from daily news tensions. This closeness sparked concern. The controversial line Basil delivered was written in reaction to the guest. Without him, it might have been a typical moment of exaggerated frustration. With him, it gained context, a target, and weight. Archived correspondence between producers and BBC reviewers reflected this tension. One memo asked whether the character might be misinterpreted as an attack on a social group. Another warned that the satire could reinforce stereotypes rather than challenge them. A senior reviewer noted the episode steps into an active cultural dispute without sufficient distance. This single character pushed the script beyond boundaries the show had previously explored. His lines shaped the tension, his interactions set the stage for Basil's infamous response, and his presence turned the joke from comedy into something that felt dangerous to air. The first internal complaint. In the archive box marked Standards and Practices, researchers found a single sheet of paper that explained why the episode's fate shifted so suddenly. It was the first internal complaint, filed before the public ever saw a frame of the controversial scene. The document was concise, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. A regional BBC reviewer, tasked with evaluating episodes before national circulation, had watched an early cut and responded with unexpected urgency. His report opened with a neutral description of the episode's structure, but the tone changed once he reached the scene involving the guest character and Basil's reaction. Unlike the earlier memos that spoke cautiously, this reviewer's concern was direct. He argued that the humor crossed a boundary the network had spent years trying to avoid. The satire, he wrote, no longer felt like a harmless exaggeration of social behavior. It felt like a pointed commentary aimed at a real, deeply divided segment of the British public. The reviewer emphasized that the line Basil delivered, combined with the guest's dialogue, created an implication that could not be softened by performance. Even if the actors shifted the tone, even if the rhythm of the scene changed, the meaning would remain clear. The complaint noted that the joke risked alienating viewers who might interpret it as ridicule rather than critique. In his assessment, the episode posed what he called a broadcast risk. The memo included a recommendation rarely seen in internal reviews. He advised the producers to reconsider the entire sequence, not through minor edits, but through substantial rethinking. He proposed either rewriting the character, restructuring the conflict, or removing the scene altogether. It was a warning that signaled the beginning of larger concerns. The producers responded by holding a private discussion with the standards team. Meeting notes showed an unsettled conversation. Some argued the satire reflected the series' purpose. Others worried that the cultural climate of the mid-1970s left little room for misinterpretation. Britain was navigating tense political fault lines. A single comedic moment, if read incorrectly, could ignite controversy far beyond the walls of a television studio. What strengthened the reviewer's complaint was the consistency of concerns already recorded during rehearsals and filming. The silence on set, the uneasy pacing, the strained delivery. Every previous note aligned with his assessment. The scene did not simply risk misunderstanding. It carried the potential to challenge the BBC's relationship with its audience. By the end of the discussion, the producers agreed to suspend final approval of the episode until a broader evaluation could be made. The complaint became the catalyst that moved the situation from internal discomfort to official scrutiny. It marked the moment the episode shifted from questionable to unstable, and the point where the BBC began considering whether the risk was worth taking. The executive screening that went wrong. The story deepened when production records revealed the first official BBC executive screening. This was not a casual review. A small private audience of decision-makers gathered in a dimly lit room, projectors humming, all focused on judging whether the episode could safely air. What unfolded during that viewing quietly determined its fate. At first, everything seemed normal. Basil's familiar frustrations, visual gags, and clumsy interactions with Manuel played as expected. Laughter arose during early beats, just as it always had. But the shift came almost imperceptibly during the scene with the infamous line. Basil's irritation, perfectly timed, collided with the guest character's pointed dialogue. Observers noted the room's energy change. Humor began to feel tense, precise, and pointed. One executive described a physical pause. The room, usually alive with quiet commentary, went completely still. A few glanced at colleagues, unsure whether they alone sensed the moment's weight. The line did not spark laughter or outrage. It sparked recognition, a shared understanding that the joke touched a real social tension more closely than anyone expected. When the scene concluded, discussions were cautious and measured. No immediate judgment was made, but a consensus emerged. This episode could not be treated like any other. By the end of the screening, the executives deferred the final decision. The episode was placed under review. From that point on, every draft, line, and performance would be re-examined. A single, unusually sharp joke had escalated into a full internal crisis, forcing the network to weigh creative freedom, satire, and public reaction, while one brief scene quietly destabilized an entire series. The pullback order. After the tense executive screening, the episode's fate remained unclear. Internal memos show that the next day, senior producers and department heads met urgently. The atmosphere was quiet and measured, a stark contrast to their usual animated debates. Everyone understood that the stakes had shifted. Production notes reveal the central question: could the episode safely air? The controversial line and the guest character's dialogue were examined carefully. The consensus emerged that the scene carried risks beyond humor. It was no longer just sharp satire. In the wrong hands, it could be seen as criticism aimed at a real social group rather than the absurdities of British life the show had always lampooned. The decision came quickly. A directive halted the scheduled broadcast. TV guide listings were quietly replaced with reruns. Cast and crew learned in fragmented updates, often only when arriving at the studio. The production team reviewed scripts and footage to see if edits could salvage the episode. The conclusion was clear. The joke, the scene, and the interactions could not be modified without undermining the story. Memos hint at unease among the creative team. Writers argued the humor reflected uncomfortable truths, exaggerated yet grounded in reality, the essence of Fawlty Towers. Producers remained firm. Airing the episode risked complaints, political scrutiny, or national-level inquiries. The potential fallout outweighed the comedic value. By day's end, the pullback order was formalized. Every copy of the master tape was cataloged and stored in a restricted archive. Notes instructed that no further screenings occur without executive approval. The cast, who had prepared meticulously, were left to wonder what had made the episode so dangerous. In retrospect, the pullback order became a turning point. A single line, delivered perfectly in character, reshaped the series' trajectory. What began as a joke quietly but irrevocably altered the history of Fawlty Towers. The public confusion. After the pullback order, the episode vanished from the production schedule. Yet word spread quickly. Journalists, freelance critics, and a few insiders began asking questions. Why had the new episode of Fawlty Towers not aired? Why were reruns suddenly replacing a fresh installment? The lack of an official explanation created a vacuum that was quickly filled with rumor. The BBC stayed quiet. Press offices offered only the standard line about scheduling adjustments. Fans noticed immediately. Viewers expecting Basil Fawlty's latest misadventures were met with reruns. Letters and calls to stations increased. Some guessed the episode contained material too controversial for broadcast. Others assumed a production delay. Inside the studio, cast and crew wrestled with their own confusion. They had rehearsed, filmed, and performed the scene that would later become infamous. Yet months later, there was no airing date, no edits, and only a brief note stating that the episode had been withheld pending review. Tension spread among those who had poured effort into the production. Whispers circulated. Had the humor crossed a line? Had Basil Fawlty become dangerous in ways no one expected? Archivists' notes reveal that rumors reached the press in fragments. Some hinted at a politically sensitive joke. Others mentioned a line directed at a real demographic. The specifics remained unknown. What mattered was that the episode had become a story without ever being seen, existing more as an idea than a broadcast. The episode became a ghost in the series' history, marking the moment when humor, control, and cultural sensitivity collided in a silent, irreversible way. The scene that disappeared. The final part of this story is about the scene that was never meant to be seen. Archival records show the infamous line, along with the guest characters' sharp dialogue, stayed locked in a restricted vault for decades. The episode was finished, rehearsed, and filmed, yet it never reached the public. Unlike most unaired shows, this wasn't a creative or technical mishap. It was deliberate, and executives stepped in to prevent a joke from sparking controversy outside the studio. Every reel was logged, stored, and kept away from any screening that didn't involve a senior executive. Access was tightly controlled. For years, the cast and crew weren't allowed to discuss the scene outside formal meetings. The BBC treated it as both evidence and potential liability, as if the joke itself had weight, a presence that could cause real trouble if released. John Cleese, who delivered the line with the precision that made the series iconic, was reportedly frustrated when first told it would be suppressed. Cast members spoke of the line carefully for years, never repeating it verbatim, yet keeping its legend alive. This scene had a strange dual life. It existed as part of Fawlty Towers while remaining completely unseen. To viewers, it became a ghost, a mystery that fueled quiet speculation. There was no public debate, no newspaper uproar, nothing outside the locked vaults. Its legend grew because it was carefully hidden. In the end, this unpublished moment became a turning point. A single carefully written and brilliantly delivered line changed the course of the show. Fawlty Towers continued for a second season, securing its place as one of Britain's greatest comedies. Yet behind the laughter, one unseen scene shaped decisions, influenced perceptions, and proved that comedy, when it hits too precisely, can provoke fear instead of applause. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.